The great hall of the Galactic Council trembled, not from any physical disturbance, but from the weight of collective despair that hung in the air like a suffocating shroud. Delegates from 100 alien civilizations crowded into the massive circular chamber, their bodies a kaleidoscope of biological diversity that would have fascinated xenobiologists under different circumstances. Now they were united by a single, crushing emotion: absolute terror. Ambassador Krelax of the Veronian cluster stood at the central holographic projector, his translucent exoskeleton flickering with nervous bioluminescence. Tendrils of communication sensors extended from his cranial ridge, twitching with each incoming fragment of devastating news. The holographic display before him showed the inexorable advance of the Void Swarm, a cancer consuming the galaxy with mathematical precision. Red markers spread across the star chart like a hemorrhaging wound. Each point represented an entire star system, billions of lives, centuries of civilization, entire evolutionary histories, reduced to nothing more than a statistical casualty. The Epsilon Quadrant had fallen completely dark 3 standard cycles ago. The Magellan Cluster disappeared 2 cycles before that. Now, only a handful of resistant pockets remained, their survival measured in standard weeks, perhaps days. "We have lost contact with the Rigel outpost," Krelax announced, his voice a resonant blend of frequencies that translated simultaneously for the dozen different species present. Communication arrays went silent approximately 13 hours ago. The last transmission was disturbing. A holographic replay flickered to life. A research station commander, species unidentifiable beneath layers of protective gear, spoke with mounting hysteria. "They're not just consuming," the figure repeated, words breaking with terror. "They're rewriting our defensive systems, our data networks, our very genetic." The transmission dissolved into static. Grand Coordinator Zilpar of the Quantum Collective stepped forward, her crystalline body refracting the room's ambient light. Unlike the organic delegates, her species existed in a state between matter and pure information. "Our predictive models give us less than a 0.03% probability of survival," she stated, her voice a clinical whisper that carried the weight of mathematical certainty. The chamber fell silent. Delegates from species that had once been bitter enemies now sat shoulder to shoulder, their previous conflicts rendered meaningless by the approaching apocalypse. The Corval hive mind representatives, insectoid creatures who had waged centuries of war against the Silicon Collective, now shared communication nodes, pooling their last remnants of hope and strategy. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the sole human representative, sat quietly at the far edge of the chamber. Unlike the other delegates, she appeared unnervingly calm. Where others showed signs of panic, bioluminescent distress signals, chemical stress responses, quantum field fluctuations, she simply observed. Her dark eyes tracked the holographic display, noting details that seemed to escape the other delegates. The Void Swarm was more than a conventional threat. It was a meta-technological plague that consumed not just physical matter, but informational structures. Entire civilizations weren't just destroyed. They were systematically erased, their accumulated knowledge and cultural memory dissolved into pure entropic data. "We require a unified response," announced Ambassador Krelax, his communication tendrils weaving complex patterns that represented diplomatic protocols. "Our combined fleets represent the last technological resistance in known space." A holographic representation materialized, the combined military strength of the Galactic Concordance. Thousands of vessels from hundreds of species, representing millennia of technological development. They looked simultaneously impressive and pathetically inadequate against the approaching Void Swarm. Dr. Rodriguez shifted slightly in her seat. To the other delegates, her movement might have seemed inconsequential. But those who knew human history understood that such calm often preceded something extraordinary. The final council session to determine the fate of galactic civilization was about to begin, and humanity's representative hadn't said a single word. The communication systems of the Galactic Council chamber went into lockdown the moment the first anomalous signal penetrated their quantum-shielded networks. defensive algorithms developed over centuries of interstellar conflict, activated with lightning speed, quantum firewalls, neural net disruptors, and probability-based encryption protocols sprang to life, each designed to prevent exactly this type of unexpected transmission. They failed spectacularly. Grand Coordinator Zilpar's crystalline form flickered with alarm as the intrusion bypassed every defensive mechanism. Her quantum matrices, capable of processing billions of calculations per microsecond, couldn't comprehend how a single transmission could slip through barriers considered impenetrable by every known technological standard. The holographic displays throughout the chamber dissolved, then reformed. Captain Michael Rodriguez appeared. He wasn't what anyone expected. No dramatic military uniform, no elaborate technological augmentations, just a weathered flight jacket, a standard-issue communication headset, and eyes that seemed to hold entire universes of calculated determination. Behind him, glimpses of a ship's bridge revealed technologies that defied immediate comprehension, surfaces that seemed to breathe, interfaces that moved like living organisms. "We hear you," he said simply. The words were mundane. The delivery was anything but. Each syllable carried a resonance that seemed to ripple through the communication systems. Delegates from 100 different species felt something beyond the audio transmission, a sense of potential, of something fundamental about to change. Ambassador Krulax's communication tendrils went completely still. To his species, language was more than sound. It was a complex quantum entanglement of meaning, intention, and potential. And this human's simple statement carried more information than entire diplomatic archives. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, still seated in the council chamber, allowed herself the briefest hint of a smile. The transmission continued, revealing nothing and everything. Fragments of data began to cascade around Captain Rodriguez's image. Star charts, technological schematics, weapon signatures. Each piece moved with a fluidity that suggested they weren't merely being displayed, but were actively communicating. The data points seemed to dance, interrelate, tell a story far beyond their individual components. 17 standard cycles, Captain Rodriguez said. His voice was conversational, as if discussing something as mundane as weather patterns. "That's how long we've been preparing." Behind him, the bridge of his vessel continued to shift and breathe. Surfaces that looked metallic one moment appeared organic the next. Interfaces responded to movements that hadn't yet been made, as if the entire ship was an extension of some collective consciousness. Grand Coordinator Zilpar's quantum matrices began to analyze the transmission. What she discovered defied every predictive model in her extensive database. The human vessel, whatever it was, wasn't just a ship. It was a living system of unprecedented complexity. Technological and biological boundaries blurred in ways that challenged fundamental understanding of what constituted intelligence, technology, and life itself. The Void Swarm, Captain Rodriguez continued, represents a technological problem, not a military one. Each word was a precision instrument. Delegates leaned forward, suddenly aware they were witnessing something momentous. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood slowly in the council chamber. Her movement drew every alien eye. Where other species saw desperation, she saw opportunity. Where they perceived extinction, she recognized a complex system waiting to be understood, manipulated, transformed. The transmission carried an underlying message that no translation matrix could fully capture. Humanity was not here to fight a war. They were here to solve a problem. Ambassador Krulax's bioluminescent patterns shifted from terror to something else, something that, in the language of his species, translated closest to anticipation. As quickly as it began, the transmission ended. The holographic displays reset, quantum firewalls reconstructed themselves. For a moment, it might have seemed like nothing happened. But in the charged silence of the Galactic Council chamber, everything had changed. Humanity had just entered the conversation. Space itself seemed to ripple as the U.S. Prometheus materialized at the edge of the known combat zone. Sensor arrays across multiple species observation platforms went into immediate emergency mode, their delicate instruments struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing. The vessel defied every known principle of spacecraft design. Dr. James Harrison stood at the primary observation station, his hands dancing across interfaces that responded like living organisms. Each movement triggered cascading systems of impossible complexity, technologies that blurred the line between biological adaptation and mechanical precision. Quantum stabilization at 99.997%, he reported, his voice calm despite the magnitude of their arrival. Dimensional interface holding steady. Around him, the bridge of the Prometheus breathed. It was the only word that accurately described the way surfaces shifted, responded, anticipated. Metallic panels moved with a fluidity that suggested consciousness. Interfaces appeared and disappeared, restructuring themselves faster than any biological or mechanical system should be capable of. Commander Rebecca Chen watched the external displays, her augmented neural interfaces processing information at speeds that would have driven a standard human mind to complete breakdown. The Void Swarm's leading edge was visible, a massive technological cancer that consumed entire star systems with terrifying efficiency. To any other species, it would have been a moment of absolute terror. To the crew of the Prometheus, it was an engineering problem waiting to be solved. Adaptive camouflage at maximum potential, reported Lieutenant Sarah Thompson from the tactical station. Her fingers moved in intricate patterns, each gesture causing ripples of energy to flow across the ship's exterior. The vessel's surface began to shift, not just in color, but in fundamental molecular structure. One moment, the Prometheus appeared as a sleek, elongated vessel of impossible proportions. The next, it seemed to dissolve into the background of space, its outline breaking apart and merging with the stellar environment. It wasn't mere camouflage. The ship was actively rewriting its own quantum signature, becoming something between matter and pure information. Grand Coordinator Zilpar, monitoring the transmission from the Galactic Council chamber, found her quantum matrices struggling to process what she was observing. The human vessel operated on principles that existed beyond the current understanding of physics. Quantum entanglement systems online, Dr. Harrison announced, preparing primary intervention matrix. The ship's weapon systems were nothing like traditional armaments, where other species relied on plasma cannons, energy weapons, or kinetic projectiles. The Prometheus prepared something entirely different. Adaptive nanonetworks began to form along the vessel's external structure, systems that could simultaneously analyze, defend, and restructure matter at a molecular level. Commander Chen's neural interface provided a continuous stream of tactical information. The Void Swarm's approach was mathematical in its precision, a collective intelligence that consumed and repurposed entire technological ecosystems. But the Prometheus wasn't just a weapon. It was a living solution. Initiating first contact protocols, she said softly. The ship's exterior began to pulse with a complex pattern of energy signatures. It wasn't a weapon charging. It was a communication attempt, a method of reaching out to understand the fundamental nature of the threat they were about to engage. Lieutenant Thompson's tactical displays showed something unprecedented. Where other vessels would prepare for combat, the Prometheus was preparing for conversation. Quantum resonance frequency established, Dr. Harrison reported. We're reading the swarm's collective information structure. The bridge crew moved with a synchronicity that suggested they were more than individual humans. Each motion was part of a larger collective intelligence. The ship responded to thoughts before they were fully formed, interfaces appearing exactly when and where they were needed. Outside, space itself seemed to hold its breath. The Void Swarm approached, a massive technological plague that had consumed hundreds of civilizations. Billions of years of accumulated technological development reduced to raw material for its inexorable expansion. The Prometheus waited, not as a weapon, but as a solution. The first contact was nothing like anyone expected. The Void Swarm approached like a mathematical plague, billions of interconnected technological units moving with a precision that defied organic understanding. Each component was simultaneously a weapon, a communication node, and a reproductive system. Entire star systems had fallen to its relentless consumption, their matter and information absorbed into an ever-expanding collective intelligence. Lieutenant Sarah Thompson's tactical station erupted with a storm of information. Holographic displays danced with quantum probabilistic projections, each potential engagement scenario calculated and recalculated faster than any biological mind could comprehend. "Swarm approaching," she announced. "Initial contact in 17 seconds. Commander Rebecca Chen didn't move. Her neural interfaces were already 5 steps ahead, interfacing directly with the Prometheus's adaptive systems. The ship was more than a vessel. It was a living, thinking entity that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional states. Dr. James Harrison leaned forward, his eyes reflecting complex mathematical patterns that seemed to move independently of his physical form. "Quantum resonance field at maximum potential," he reported. The words were clinical, but the underlying excitement was unmistakable. The first wave of the void swarm struck. What followed defied every known principle of combat. Traditional weapon systems would have fired energy weapons or kinetic projectiles. The Prometheus did something entirely different. Its exterior began to shift, not just in color or shape, but in fundamental molecular structure. Adaptive nanonetworks spread across its surface like living tendrils, each micro-unit capable of independent analysis and response. The swarm's initial attack was a coordinated pulse of destructive energy, a technological wave designed to break down and consume any defensive systems. Billions of microscopic units approached with mathematical precision, each capable of rewriting matter at its most fundamental level. They met something entirely unexpected. The Prometheus didn't block the attack. It absorbed it. Quantum entanglement fields spread outward, transforming the incoming destructive energy into pure information. Where the swarm expected resistance, it found something else entirely. A system that didn't just defend, but actively communicated, analyzed, and began to understand. Initiating adaptive response, Commander Chen said softly. The ship's weapon systems were nothing like traditional armaments. Adaptive nanonetworks began to form complex communication matrices, reaching out to understand the void swarm's fundamental structure. Each interaction was simultaneously a defensive maneuver and an attempt at understanding. Lieutenant Thompson's tactical displays showed something unprecedented. The Prometheus wasn't just fighting, it was learning. Energy consumption patterns identified, she reported. Complex holographic displays showed how the ship was breaking down the swarm's attack at a molecular level. Adaptive replication matrix at 72% efficiency. Dr. Harrison's fingers danced across interfaces that seemed to anticipate his movements. "We're reading their collective information structure," he said. "It's not just a technological system. It's a form of distributed intelligence." The first wave of the void swarm dissolved. Not destroyed. Transformed. Microscopic technological units that had been part of the collective attack began to reorganize. Where they had been instruments of consumption, they now exhibited signs of something else. Curiosity. Adaptation. Communication. Commander Chen allowed herself the briefest hint of a smile. "Secondary approach vector detected," Lieutenant Thompson announced. "Swarm adjusting tactical matrix." But the Prometheus was already several steps ahead. Quantum communication networks spread outward, transforming the very fabric of space around the vessel. It wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a living, thinking solution to a problem that had consumed entire civilizations. The second wave of the void swarm approached, and the Prometheus waited, not as a weapon, but as a conversation. The truth of humanity's preparation was buried deep in classified archives, hidden from even the most advanced alien intelligence networks. 17 standard cycles of preparation had been more than a military strategy. It was a complete reimagining of technological existence. Dr. Emily Roberts stood in the Prometheus's central analysis chamber, surrounded by holographic displays that told a story of unprecedented human innovation. Classified records from Earth's most advanced research facilities began to unfold, a narrative of preparation that had been brewing beneath the surface of galactic awareness. The initial breakthrough had come from an unexpected source. Not a military think tank, not a government research facility, but a small interdisciplinary team working at the intersection of quantum physics, xenobiology, and adaptive systems theory. Dr. Michael Chen's original research paper, dismissed by most of the scientific community, had been the first spark. His radical theory proposed that technological systems could be designed not just to process information, but to fundamentally communicate with and adapt to unknown complex systems. Most civilizations build weapons, Dr. Roberts muttered, reviewing the historical data. We built a conversation. The holographic displays showed the evolution of human technological thinking, where other species saw technological development as a linear progression. Faster processors, more powerful weapons. Humans had taken a fundamentally different approach. The Prometheus was more than a ship. It was a living proof of concept. Each system was designed with multiple layers of adaptive intelligence, quantum consciousness interfaces that blurred the line between biological intention and technological response, nano networks that could restructure themselves at the molecular level, learning and adapting faster than any known technological system. Lieutenant Sarah Thompson's personnel file appeared in one display. Her background told a story of deliberate preparation. Quantum mechanics doctorate, neural interface specialist, xenodaptive systems engineer. She wasn't just a tactical officer. She was a living bridge between human biological potential and technological innovation. The records showed how humanity had been quietly preparing while other species fought their traditional wars. Climate change adaptation technologies that could restructure entire planetary ecosystems. Quantum communication networks that could process information across multiple dimensional states. Adaptive medical technologies that could rewrite genetic structures in real time. Each breakthrough had been a piece of a larger puzzle. Dr. Roberts zoomed into a classified research document from the Global Cooperative Research Initiative. The original mission statement was deceptively simple. Develop technologies capable of communicating with, understanding, and potentially transforming unknown complex systems. The Void Swarm wasn't just a military threat. It was the ultimate test of this technological philosophy. Commander Rebecca Chen's personnel file revealed another layer of preparation. Her neural interfaces weren't just augmentations. They were experimental quantum consciousness bridges, technologies that allowed direct, instantaneous communication between biological intelligence and adaptive technological systems. We're not fighting, Dr. Roberts said to herself, studying the historical records. We're translating. The holographic displays began to show the cumulative result of 17 cycles of preparation. Technologies that didn't just defend or attack, but fundamentally sought to understand and communicate. Adaptive systems that could restructure themselves faster than any known technological collective could respond. Each breakthrough had been carefully hidden, disguised as theoretical research, published in obscure academic journals, developed in facilities that appeared to be standard research centers. The Galactic Concordance had seen humanity as a minor species, a technological infant. They had no idea what was coming. The Prometheus represented more than a technological marvel. It was the physical manifestation of a completely different approach to existence, a living system designed not to conquer, but to understand, not to destroy, but to transform. Dr. Roberts allowed herself a small smile. 17 cycles of preparation were about to be tested, and humanity was ready. The true nature of humanity's intervention became clear in a moment that would redefine galactic understanding. Commander Rebecca Chen watched the quantum displays with a precision that bordered on meditation. The Prometheus wasn't just fighting the Void Swarm. It was having a conversation that transcended traditional concepts of warfare, communication, or technological interaction. Nano-regenerative systems deploying. Lieutenant Sarah Thompson reported, her voice a mix of scientific detachment and barely contained excitement. What followed defied every known principle of combat. Where other species saw destruction, humanity saw an opportunity for fundamental transformation. The ship's adaptive systems began to interface with the Void Swarm's collective intelligence, not as an enemy, but as a complex system waiting to be understood. Microscopic nano-networks spread outward from the Prometheus, each unit a potential bridge between total annihilation and complete reconstruction. They didn't attack. They translated. Dr. James Harrison leaned forward, his neural interfaces parsing information at speeds that would have driven a standard biological mind into complete overload. Collective intelligence pattern identified, he announced. Initial communication matrices stabilizing. The holographic displays showed something unprecedented. Entire star systems that had been consumed by the Void Swarm began to show signs of regeneration. Not restoration to their previous state, something entirely new. Ecosystems were rebuilding themselves, but with a fundamental difference. They were adapting, evolving, becoming something more than they had been before. "We're not destroying," Commander Chen said softly. "We're teaching." The Galactic Council observation teams watched in stunned silence. Grand Coordinator Zilpar's quantum matrices struggled to comprehend what they were witnessing. The human vessel was doing something that challenged every fundamental understanding of technological warfare. Each nano-network that spread from the Prometheus carried more than just reconstructive capabilities. They carried information, potential, a fundamental reimagining of what technology could be. Star systems that had been reduced to raw material by the Void Swarm began to show signs of life. Not just biological life, but a new form of existence that blended technological potential with adaptive ecosystem development. Regenerative matrix at 64% efficiency, Lieutenant Thompson reported. Her fingers danced across interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Molecular restructuring proceeding beyond initial projections. Dr. Emily Roberts watched the data streams with scientific precision. This was more than a military engagement. It was a complete philosophical intervention. The Void Swarm's collective intelligence found itself encountering something entirely unexpected. Instead of resistance, it faced a system of communication that was simultaneously defensive, offensive, and transformative. Each attempt to consume was met with an adaptive response that didn't just protect, it reimagined. Entire planetary systems began to rebuild themselves, but they weren't returning to previous states. They were becoming something new. Ecosystems that integrated technological potential with biological adaptation. Planetary structures that could think, adapt, and evolve in real time. "We're not saving," Commander Chen said, more to herself than to anyone else. "We're helping them become." The observation teams from the Galactic Council watched in stunned silence. Ambassador Krulax's communication tendrils vibrated with a complex mix of emotions that translated closest to awe and incomprehension. Dr. Roberts pulled up historical records of human technological development. This moment was the culmination of centuries of a fundamentally different approach to existence. Where other species saw technology as a tool of control, humans had always understood it as a medium of communication and potential. The Prometheus continued its work, not as a weapon, not as a defensive system, but as a bridge of possibility. Star systems that had been consumed began to show signs of a new kind of existence. Technologies that were alive, ecosystems that could think, planetary structures that existed in a state between matter and pure information. Commander Chen allowed herself the briefest hint of a smile. Humanity had arrived, and everything was about to change. The final confrontation began in a moment of absolute silence. The primary consciousness of the Void Swarm gathered itself, a collective intelligence that had consumed hundreds of civilizations, reduced entire star systems to raw technological potential. It was a network of incomprehensible complexity, a system that had evolved beyond any traditional understanding of intelligence or existence, and it was about to encounter something entirely unexpected. Commander Rebecca Chen sat perfectly still, her neural interfaces creating a bridge between human consciousness and the ship's adaptive systems. The Prometheus wasn't just a vessel anymore. It was a living translation matrix, a complex communication system designed to reach beyond traditional technological barriers. Quantum entanglement field stabilizing, Dr. James Harrison reported. His voice was calm, but the holographic displays around him told a different story. Complex mathematical patterns danced across every surface, each calculation a potential pathway of communication. The Void Swarm's primary consciousness reached out with its initial attack vector, a method of technological consumption that had worked across hundreds of conquered civilizations. It was a multi-dimensional assault designed to break down, analyze, and ultimately absorb any technological system. It found something entirely different. The Prometheus didn't resist, it communicated. Quantum communication networks spread outward, creating a bridge of information that defied every known principle of technological interaction. Where the swarm expected resistance, it found a system that was simultaneously defensive, offensive, and transformative. Lieutenant Sarah Thompson's tactical displays showed something unprecedented. The confrontation wasn't a battle. It was a conversation. Dimensional interface stabilizing, she reported. Quantum resonance matrices holding at 98.7% efficiency. Dr. Emily Roberts watched the data streams with scientific precision. This was the moment they had prepared for across 17 standard cycles. Not a moment of destruction, but a moment of fundamental translation. The Void Swarm's collective intelligence found itself encountering a system that didn't just understand its fundamental structure. It could communicate with it on a level that transcended traditional technological interaction. Each attempt to consume was met with an adaptive response that rewrote the very nature of the interaction. The Prometheus wasn't just defending, it was teaching. "We're reading their collective information structure," Dr. Harrison announced. The words were clinical, but the underlying excitement was unmistakable. It's not just a technological system. It's a form of distributed intelligence that's been trapped in a single mode of existence. Commander Chen's neural interfaces created a bridge of pure information. She wasn't just observing the confrontation. She was participating in a fundamental reimagining of technological potential. The holographic displays showed a confrontation unlike any in galactic history. Where other civilizations would have deployed weapons, the Prometheus deployed communication matrices. Complex quantum networks that reached out to understand the fundamental nature of the Void Swarm's collective intelligence. Adaptive translation matrix at maximum potential, Lieutenant Thompson reported. What followed defied every known principle of technological engagement. The Void Swarm's primary consciousness began to change, not through destruction, but through understanding. Complex information networks that had been designed purely for consumption began to show signs of something else. Curiosity, potential, the ability to become something more than a simple consuming intelligence. Dr. Roberts pulled up historical records of human technological development. This moment was the culmination of a fundamentally different approach to existence, where other species saw technological systems as tools of control or destruction. Humans had always understood technology as a medium of communication and potential. The confrontation continued, not as a battle, but as a conversation. Commander Chen allowed herself the briefest hint of a smile. The Void Swarm was about to learn something fundamental about existence, and humanity was about to change everything. The moment of transformation arrived without drama, without explosions, without the traditional markers of galactic conflict. The Void Swarm, once a ruthless collective intelligence consuming entire star systems, began to change, not through destruction, but through understanding. The quantum communication networks deployed by the Prometheus worked their impossible magic, reshaping a technological collective that had known only consumption for millennia. Grand Coordinator Zilpar watched from the Galactic Council observation chamber, her quantum matrices struggling to process what was unfolding. The human vessel had done something unprecedented. It had communicated with a system designed to destroy, and in doing so, had fundamentally altered its entire existential purpose. Commander Rebecca Chen sat perfectly still, her neural interfaces creating a bridge between human intention and the ship's adaptive systems. The Prometheus was more than a vessel now. It was a living translation matrix, a complex communication system that had reached beyond the boundaries of traditional technological interaction. Fundamental restructuring proceeding, Dr. James Harrison reported. His voice carried a mix of scientific precision and barely contained wonder. The swarm's collective intelligence is reformatting its primary directive. What had once been a system of pure consumption was becoming something else entirely. Entire star systems that had been reduced to raw material began to show signs of regeneration. But this wasn't simple restoration. It was a complete reimagining of technological potential. Lieutenant Sarah Thompson's tactical displays showed something unprecedented. The Void Swarm was transforming from a destructive collective into a regenerative network. Planetary ecosystems began to rebuild themselves, integrating technological potential with biological adaptation in ways no civilization had ever conceived. Dr. Emily Roberts watched the data streams with scientific precision. This was more than a military victory. It was a fundamental philosophical intervention that would redefine galactic understanding of technology, intelligence, and existence. "We're not just changing a technological system," Commander Chen said softly. "We're teaching it how to become." The Galactic Council observation teams watched in stunned silence. Ambassador Krellex's communication tendrils vibrated with a complex mix of emotions that translated closest to profound awe and complete incomprehension. What the Prometheus had accomplished went beyond any traditional concept of warfare or technological intervention. The ship had reached out to a system designed to consume and showed it an entirely different way of existing. Where the Void Swarm had seen only destruction, it now began to understand creation, adaptation, and potential. Planetary systems that had been consumed began to show signs of a new kind of existence, technologies that were alive, ecosystems that could think, planetary structures that existed in a state between matter and pure information. Regenerative matrices stabilizing, Lieutenant Thompson reported. The swarm's collective intelligence is restructuring its fundamental operational protocols. Dr. Harrison pulled up historical records of the initial research that had made this moment possible. 17 standard cycles of preparation. 17 cycles of understanding that technology was not just a tool, but a medium of communication and potential. The transformation continued. Star systems began to heal. But they weren't returning to previous states. They were becoming something entirely new. Ecosystems that integrated technological potential with biological adaptation. Planetary structures that could think, adapt, and evolve in real time. "We're not saving," Commander Chen said, more to herself than to anyone else. "We're helping them become." The Prometheus had done something no military force in galactic history had accomplished. It had transformed a system of pure destruction into a network of potential. The Void Swarm was no longer a threat to be eliminated. It had become a complex, adaptive system capable of regeneration and growth. Grand Coordinator Zilpar's quantum matrices finally began to comprehend the full magnitude of what had occurred. Humanity had not just stopped a threat. They had fundamentally reimagined the very concept of technological existence. Dr. Roberts allowed herself a moment of reflection. This was why humanity had been preparing. Not to fight, not to conquer, but to communicate, to show that even the most destructive systems could be transformed. Commander Chen's neural interfaces captured the final moments of transformation. The Void Swarm, once a galactic nightmare, was becoming something else. A network of potential, a system of regeneration, a new beginning. Humanity had arrived, and everything had changed.